Force. Thanks for joining us for this next Synchronisation Force workshop. And the topic for this one is trustworthy and FAIR-enabling repositories. So move to the next slide. And the next one, please. So some information on how the session is running. So there is going to be a recording made, as you just been made aware. And that recording and the Zoom chat will be uploaded into the FAIR Impact Google Drive, and videos of this session will be uploaded to YouTube in unlisted mode for sharing with you later on if you want to go back and watch again. There is a collaborative spreadsheet and a note-taking document available. I believe there's links in the chat for there. And for the spreadsheet, just some advice on that for filling it in. So keep your statements factual, keep them brief, and provide a link where possible. Make sure you're only editing your own cells, don't edit cells from other people. If you want to say more, there is a collaborative notes document that's available as well during the session. And that's for your more detailed points and narrative points as well. So, you know, if you want to comment on something or express an opinion, that's the place to do that. If you do that, then could you please add your name in parentheses or brackets to that, just so we know who's talking. Use your name or initials or just some kind of identifier, so we know who's making that contribution. And yeah, the next slide, please. Thanks. So trustworthy and FAIR-enabling repositories. My name is Lawrence Horton from the Digital Curation Center, and I'm going to be chairing the session. We have two rapporteurs today. So one of them is Michael Verber from Dance, and the other is my colleague Daniel Turner from DCC. So they're going to be taking the notes and helping facilitate discussions. And for the recommendations we're going to be looking at in the session today, we have four people who are going to introduce each recommendation. So first of all, we have Socrates Parakletis from UCL, and Marine Vernet and Kathleen Schöner and Marie-Claire Mola. They're going to introduce each recommendation, and we're going to then spend some time talking about those recommendations and trying to pull together some advice, thoughts, best approaches to dealing with those recommendations as well. So move on to the next slide. This is the third version of this workshop. The previous one we ran in a year ago, so already a year ago, nearly a year, 2023, and that's a link to the document that came out of that session, if you want to go back and reference that. And this is where we were taking the recommendations for discussion today from. So that's the reference to that one. So the next slide, please. Session aims. Yep, aim of this session. So we're looking to share actions that help improve the transparency and trustworthy of FAIR-enabling repositories, and discuss the benefits of working collaboratively to achieve this. So how can we help each other? And we're also looking to identify and explore those areas that require further support. So those kind of things that we can't quite do on our own. So the next slide. So I want to just start us off as a group really today, thinking about trustworthy, get us thinking about what it means and engage perhaps in some discussion on that. So what is trustworthy? So this is a definition from the American Association of Archivists. This is their glossary definition. Trustworthiness, noun or adjective, it's the quality of being dependable and reliable. So I'm thinking sort of, how do we demonstrate trust in this context? You know, what evidence is dependability? And what signals do you send out to show you're reliable? So for the next slide, please. We have set up a Menti. Those of you who've used Menti before, these are three ways to get into the Menti discussion there. So you can use the numerical code at the top, or you could just click on the link, or if you have your mobile device, you can use the QR code, which should work. It worked yesterday. And if you go to that, that should show you the question. So I shall now go to that. And hopefully we can get some of your initial responses in there as to what makes up trustworthy. What do you think trustworthiness is made of? So I'm just opening that now. I'm waiting to see what answers are coming in or suggestions are coming in. So yeah, we'll see transparency, policies and procedures, clear repository policies, processes, yeah. Transparency meeting user needs, governance, clear rules, no broken links. Yes, very important. Yeah, transparency, data creation process, adherence to OAIS recommendations, funding, sustainability, exit plan, clear policies. I think somebody is very familiar with Core Trust Seal who submitted that one. Yeah, well-established guidelines. Yeah, the Trusted Repositories Working Group, management and technical aspects, organizational, indeed. No server error. Yeah, yes. Yeah, long term.
Yeah, Lawrence, do you want to try and share your screen again so that people can see the results?
Yeah, okay. Let's have another go. Okay, hopefully people can see that.
So I think you are sharing the user interface here rather than the Menti itself from an admin point of view.
Okay.
I mean, not that it really matters. I guess you will be sharing this input with the
Yeah,
participants afterwards.
I clicked on the same link I gave you, so hopefully we're looking at the same thing. But yeah, that will stay open anyway. So I'll keep that link open for a couple of days so we can look at responses as they come in there. Am I still sharing the presentation?
No, you are not sharing anything.
I'm not sharing anything. Oh, fantastic.
Now you or someone is. Sarah, I guess.
Yeah,
Sarah, okay.
I started back the presentation. Shall
Thank
I
you.
move on?
Yeah, if you can move on, please. So yeah, thank you for those contributions. As I say, we'll keep those open and maybe check in at the end on those. But as I said, this session was run last year as well, and we asked the same question. And I just went back to the responses from that session and just did a very rough coding up of those into sort of keywords that are mentioned in those discussions. And last time, documentation was mentioned 6 times, transparency, demonstrating transparency, sustainability, and the importance of community as well. And a couple of others there were mentioned, by at least one participant: availability, certification, expertise, provenance, quality, rights management, and security. So yeah, interesting. I mean, some of you may have been in that previous session, but it's interesting to see those things come up again and again in these discussions. So hopefully we can pick up on how to actually sort of do some of these things in the session. So if we can move on to the next slide. So this is our first recommendation we're going to discuss today, and I'll just introduce this recommendation. So recommendation 1, increasing process transparency is vital to effectively assess repository trustworthiness as encapsulated in the principle of trust through transparency. So again, transparency very important way of demonstrating trust. So, being able to see what you're claiming to do. So we have our first sort of conversation starting now to discuss this idea. So Socrates Varakletos from UCL is going to talk about this recommendation in the context of fair impact, trustworthy and fair-enabling repositories support actions. So can I hand over to you, Socrates?
Thank you, Lawrence. Yeah, next slide, please. I'm missing my slides there in this lot.
I think they're one slide after this, Sarah. I think it's just the order that's a bit.
Yeah, it's after the
And
recommendation.
slide 12 onwards, you should be good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is it. All right, thanks. A very brief introduction. I'm a research data steward at University College London. We have two teams taking care of the institutional repository at UCL. One team is ARC, my team, Advanced Research Computing, and we're more on the technical side. And we also have our library services with my colleague Christiane and Kirsty, who are more liaising with the end users. We have an RDR based on the Figshare product. We are a large organization, about 65,000+ staff and students together. So we got motivated to reignite our effort in updating the core trust seal by participating in the Fair Impact cascading grants. It was Open Call 2, Support Action 3, if I remember correctly, recommendations for trustworthy and fair-enabling data repositories. So I'll speak to you a little bit about our experiences following the guidelines. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So we used the guidelines that were drafted by the Fair Impact Project to conduct a self-assessment of the UCL RDR. And we identified a few areas where we thought we could improve. For example, I just put indicatively some of them in the next couple of slides, just to go through them with you. For example, one of them was we found that the institutional website and the RDR website had different wordings or slightly different wordings about commonly used terms or processes we follow. So how we addressed this, we redesigned some aspects of the website on the institutional side to better match the service, the repository service, and we follow the trustworthiness criteria that we got out of the project, of the Fair Impact project. So we now have a well-rounded info provided and published. Things like text on curation on the metadata on which license or terms for deposit and terms for access. For example, we found our legal terms and conditions from Figshare pointed to as terms in the same page as the terms of deposit and access, and I think that was confusing. Things like that. That was one thing we could improve on, and we did. Second area we thought we could improve was the naming. We found inconsistencies in the name as it is advertised by research registries, identifiers. So basically, UCL is University College London. There's another UCL out there with the same acronym, Université Catholique de Leuven. We thought that our repository should unambiguously reflect who we are. And that was a good catch, I think, by the guidelines, by applying one of the criteria. We also found that some information within the registry records were not very consistent. So we are now contacting more methodically each one of them to update some of this information they hold about us, which I believe were entered manually in the past. Another area of improvement is that we found our repository registered in multiple registries, and some of these registries were containing outdated information about us. So either they did not exist anymore, or there is not much effort in maintaining the registries, if that is an issue, or we dug out a little bit further on our side and we figured out there might be it might be related to the history of how departments and sciences evolved within the institution. So we had, for example, an individual department registering with a registry on behalf of the whole university. Maybe that was 20 or 30 years ago, and this information might still be valid or still visible. So this is one area, one set of areas we addressed. Next slide, please. One other area is the fields of research. We found a lot of disparity maybe, or diversity maybe there across different vocabularies. We are, of course, bound by the vocabulary, the specific vocabulary used by our repository, but this is an area we felt needs a little bit more attention on our side, and we wanted to be more aligned with what we present or we get ourselves known to our users as. This also had a positive side effect. It enabled our technical team, the ARC side of managing the repository, to work on things like APIs, the RDR API, the JSON LD metadata, and what we publish to the world about the repository. The next two, which are in different color, are not exactly captured by the guidelines, but we found that by following the process and the exercise had a little bit of a positive side effect, impact on the way we work. So we found ourselves more linked with the counterparts in the library services team. So we now have regular meetings and we have a common certification objective and we are planning it together. One aspect that we also found as a side effect, very positive, was that while updating the institutional website, the institution UCL has policies and guidelines for providing accessible content. And this was not so much the case previously when we published information about the service. So we feel we now have to do this for the RDR as well, and we are in the process of doing it. And the final slide, please. A couple of recommendations that I might be encroaching on the next couple of sessions, but a couple of things we've learned and we think we should highlight here for this session is that we should be using well-known and established guidelines as a motivation and the tools they produce. We found the FAIR impact guidelines very relevant, and we've used a lot the Fuji tool to get metrics and compare these with others, see how we're faring against a number of data sets that we store, and we're looking forward to its software extensions because we are storing software artifacts on the UCL RDR. Most importantly, is the last point I wanted to make is to share our experiences on the journey towards CTS, to have a sort of community of practice, somewhere we could share experiences and ask a buddy, if you like, on how, when we get stuck with one of the many requests or many requirements they have for the CTS, how to approach and how to solve things when we're challenged. This could be done at a national level, could be done at a European level or global level, but certainly there's value in having these discussions in a community setting. That's all I would like to say about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a couple of comments in the chat, questions. Just trying to scroll back and find them there. So there was, yeah, one from Nick about is his institutional badging like Elixir recommended interoperability resource.
It was following on from Maggie. She was asking what the acronym meant.
Okay, yeah, sorry. Okay. And there's another question from Maggie for Socrates. Like, do you have a entry in the re3 data catalog?
Where exactly are we? Which comment?
From Maggie Hellstrom. Do you have an entry?
They're in the
with slash
chat,
entries and-
Socrates.
Yeah, I'm just scrolling down. Oh, entries or registers. Yeah, we do have, yes. And we found that we are not fully, they're not updated. We need to update this, and we started doing this.
Paolo has a question.
Yeah, actually a point to make. Thank you for your presentation. I came in late, but many of the things you touched upon are very interesting. I would say that one of the most important things you said is this building a community of practice. And that's because I'm Paolo, so I work for and we build the open air graph, right? So we are very touchy about certifications of data sources, quality of metadata, and so on. And the feeling I have is that even when you have everything in place, like technical tools that can allow you to check on the quality or the fulfillment of certain criteria and so on, there is still one level that you cannot achieve, which is the one of common agreements on what is what, right? And one of the key issues that we have here, especially when we talk about data repositories, is what the researcher or the librarian or whoever provides for the metadata curation means for something like research data or data sets or software or whatever, right? So as a result of this, you may have multiple highly curated repositories which provide complete metadata, which have been scrutinized by experts and so on, that are delivering the same concept according to different interpretations. And that becomes a big issue, right? Because it's not just a matter of fulfilling the metadata, but it's also a matter of aligning on certain concepts and conditions. So I think as part of the certification, we should really build this community where we all agree on what should be, for example, resource types as a piece of software or as a workflow, or whatever happens with something in between, with something that is unclear. So I could actually ask somebody, hey guys, what do you think? What would be the right typing for this object or this other object? And this somehow should actually reach out to the end researcher, because again, no librarian, no administrator in the world can actually download all files that have been uploaded by somebody and check that effectively they are what the researcher meant. And the variety there is exceptional. So something that is really hard to manage at the end of the stream, let's say. So the sooner we capture it, the better. This is why certification is important. This is why this building community of practice, I think, is central to make the scholarly communication work in open science.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I think the other questions are largely about specific identifier schemes that Socrates might be using, like RAID and RAW and so on, which is basically how standards compliance are you, Socrates, I guess.
Yeah, good question. I don't have the full answers. It's my library colleagues who might have these answers for you. But we do follow some. I don't know which ones they are.
Francois.
Yes, it's just a first comment. The fact that in France, RDA France is organizing a community of practice of people who have, of registries which have core trust seal certification or which are considering the possibility to join. It just, I think we will go back to that later, but it's a direct comment on what you were saying. Since you were suggesting it can be done at the national level, it's true because we are all in the same conditions, in the same context, and it helps to know what we are discussing in terms of constraints. But we would like to join something at the European level or international level.
Absolutely. And there's a momentum as well because of the outcomes of the FAIR impact. I think there's a number of us who participated in the cascading grants with the similar objectives. So maybe the timing is good.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, two things I sort of noticed from your presentation there was the importance of consistent terminology, internally and externally as well. That can sometimes be problematic. And also this comes up, I think, repeatedly in this session. Is going to come up, and it came up in the spreadsheet when I was looking through the responses there. A desire for community around trustworthy and trustworthiness, working together to demonstrate trust and trustworthiness. How can we do that? Whether it's addressing Culture Seal or just sort of working on other practices to demonstrate trustworthiness, a need for some kind of community to work together to do that. Yep. Any other points in the chat there? I think so. Yeah, just a plug there from Alison about fair sharing. So you can update repository records about your repository in fair sharing there.
That was just a direct response to Socrates saying that it was awkward because some of the metadata about his repository was out of date in some of the registries. So that's just why I put that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, recommend that. Yeah, and some of the discussion now on community. So yeah, I'd say that the community point keeps coming up. I think in a lot of the comments I saw in the spreadsheet around this topic. So yeah. So unless there's any other points. Oh, sorry, Maggie, you had a hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the point that I think communities of practice are really good, but one big issue with that is, of course, that it's a voluntary effort. Who actually contributes from various repositories in this case it may not be consistent over time, and therefore I think a COP needs to be well organized. So there really has to be funding set aside for some organization that is willing to host the COP and drive the meetings and activities forward, because otherwise you very quickly sort of founder and lose focus.
Paolo.
Yeah, and just to highlight that there's a project that has been funded in the last call. And that is actually targeting exactly this thing. So building a network of European trusted repositories. So maybe this project could be the opportunity for us actually also to find some resources. Maybe Maggie, I'm not sure because I'm not involved in the consortium. So the consortium.
Yeah, and neither am I. And I think the name, we'll hear more about this obviously in a few minutes, but I think if you say that it's a network of trusted repositories, then repositories who are not yet certified as trustworthy would feel that they are not welcome there, or it's not the right. So I mean that is very critical that you have a good communication and a good name for such a network, etc. It's just my 2 cents to this.
Yeah, no, but it's the other way around. So this is supporting the creation of a network. So it's not just inclusive for only those that are certificated. Marie?
Yes, I would like to insist on the fact, in France, in the networking we do, there are repositories which are certified, some which are going to present a submission, but it's open to all interested repositories. And I think it helps a lot people to think about their practices. Sorry, Marie.
Oh, okay, it's okay, Frances. So yes, I just wanted to mention, yes, the project that will start in January will be called Fidelis, and I will present it later today. Yeah. So, but I'm really taking notes now. This is all very interesting. So keep the comments coming. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a good cue to move on to the next recommendation, I feel. So this is recommendation 2. Repository support should include generic solutions for widespread applicability and detailed customized support for specific or local individual needs. And a conversation starter for this one is Marie Vernet, Culture Seal for Marine Data Repositories. So Marine, are you ready to start the conversation?
Yeah. I don't have slides, so hope I will be clear
no
enough. So I work at IFREMER, which is a French Oceanographic Research Institute. And we'll talk about my experience in providing or in working on a project to provide support for French marine data repositories to help them engage into the cultural seal certification. So this experience I obtained within the framework of ODATIS. It's the French Ocean Data Cluster that is part of a larger national research infrastructure called DataTerra. And ODATIS aims at facilitating access to ocean observation data and federate data management activities nationally. ODATIS is composed of several data and services centers that are partner centers that ensure provision of services with different functions, such as hosting and managing databases and products, making data products accessible, interoperable through the cluster portal, and maintaining the associated documentation. And IFREMER and CISMER, as a service where our work, is part of ODATIS, is part of those data and services centers, and has obtained certification from Cultural Seal in 2019 and renewed its certification in 2023. So in 2020, ODATIS has received funding from the French Research Agency to conduct a project called Copilote, with the objective of helping ODATIS Data and Services Center to engage towards Cultural Seal certification. The goal was to harmonize the processes of each data and services centers of ODATIS to strengthen the infrastructure and enhance the reliability of ODATIS infrastructure. So through this project, which lasted 3 years, ODATIS data and services centers have received a mix of generic and customized support. So they have received generic support from mostly a working group, RDA France and French Open Science Committee working group, because each data and services center attended workshop delivered by the working group experts, workshops about Cultural Seal certification, to better understand the overall process of certification, the requirements, the criteria, and also the tools that are available to help them prepare the certification. They also benefited from the translation of the Cultural Seal guide into French, was helpful, and from a dedicated tool to format the Cultural Seal file and conduct self-assessment regarding Cultural Seal criteria. And they also were provided customized support from the ODATIS data management team. There was regular follow-up meetings with each of the data center representative to help them prepare their certification documents and review the certification file. And through the project, there were also regular meetings between each of the data and services centers to present advancement, discuss issues collaboratively. There were also cross-assessments that were performed between the data and services centers, so they could give advice on each of their certification file. And the project also proposed financial support to finance the Cultural Seal application fees and engage someone at ODATIS to work on the project. So in the end, I think generic support had proved really useful to better understand the process, what is expected, and also through the workshops organized by the RDI working group, it's helpful to collect inputs and advice about certification process from experts of the working group, but also from some repositories that have already been engaged in this certification process and can give examples. Although at the time there were not that much, if I remember. But we have seen through the project that the customer support was also necessary when writing the response to each criteria. Some criteria are more difficult than others, and so data and services centers are structured differently. So they might need, they might have some specific needs and questions regarding certification, and going together with them with those regular meetings was helpful. And regarding lesson learned, I think what we learn is that it's quite difficult to find time to work on the certification. Each data and services center had to dedicate time, and it was quite complicated. The fact that it was within the framework of a project was helpful, and also within a community, the Odeti's community, so that they could compare with each other and get inputs with each other and discuss issues. The fact also that one of the data and services centers, so CISMER, Tifremer, had already obtained the certification and could provide experience in the certification process proved helpful. And the difficulties, however, they still face difficulties, and there was truly the time needed to work on the certification. Even after the courtesy file is submitted, I mean, there are still ongoing exchanges with the courtesy reviewers, and you need to update your file, so it takes time. And there was also some difficulties to find the right granularity for the scope of the data repository, so what we want to certify, and also for the information provided for each criteria, how detailed we need to go. Regarding what could help in this regard, well, dedicated human resources obtained through more funding, through projects or calls, dedicated calls, or the means that can help dedicate human resources to this work. And also, this has been said before, but yes, a network or committee of practice, network of repositories that are engaged in certification process, are already certified, and that help share examples, provide inputs, discuss issues, and yeah, reply to questions, to more specific questions is something that is important, I think, and that it's already being organized partly in France. But the last thing I need to say, perhaps in this regard, is a committee of practice, that it also takes time to engage in such committee of practice. So time is the question here.
Okay, thank you. Any immediate reactions to that? Like for me, once again, community comes up, or some kind of support network. It was interesting. I was looking through the comments from the spreadsheet, and community was mentioned a couple of times in there, but also the idea of a permanent consultancy being available for people interested in Quarter Seal certification to get the consultancy in to help them do it. So that just as a way to smooth the process, maybe stop some of this back and forth reviews and some of the bureaucratic elements. So that was one thing. And the other thing you mentioned as well, that I think again comes up a lot, is the resources required, and the commitment that needs to be made in terms of time and effort to undertake this, and how best to support that. I see some hands going up now. So Maggie, you've come up first on the list there.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that despite having received very, very helpful support, first from the EUDAT 2020 project, actually, and then later on, I guess, from FAIR and others, my repository is still struggling with the CTS reviewers to have them accept whatever our application is. So we're now 3 years into the latest attempt at getting certified, and we send in an application, we get reviewers' response, we address that, and a new set of reviewers comes in and disagrees with the earlier reviewers, coming up with other problems that we have to go back and fix, and we're just in this indeterminate loop. So I think it's not just a need to have support and the possibility to discuss with other repositories in terms of a network or something. There's also a need for a big organization like the EOSC or something similar to lean on the certifiers and really point out that they need to actually shape up and get their stuff in order, because this is ridiculous.
Carol?
Actually, Maggie said some of it already for me, which is not surprising. But in Elixir, for example, we more or less have pretty well abandoned Core Trust Seal as a mechanism, because we've set up our own core data resources and the global biodata coalition, which is much more agile and much more tied to the actual needs of the research community, and also balances repositories against a holistic landscape of the requirements of repositories in the biospace and the demands of how to sustain them. So we kind of is a bit more of a kind of a holistic approach. It's not perfect by any means, but Core Trust Seal, we had similar issues, Maggie. I also noted that it was really important to have a national support. So the French, the oceans, for example, this is quite impressive work. And I see that Francois has just put in about that there's a dedicated resource activity at the national level to do data certification. And I think this is kind of essential. And in fact, I think it speaks to Maggie's point, because if you then have a national voice, it has more emphasis on getting things done rather than this continuous cycle. So I agree. It's okay saying Core Trust Seal is important, but actually it doesn't really work at the moment. That's probably resourcing and processes and maybe also culture.
Mary.
Oh, thank you. So I would, well, I'm a member of the Core Trust Seal board. I can't discuss individual applications here, but I just as a general comment, I think, well, Core Trust Seal is not perfect. We all know that, but I will say that it is a community effort. So the applications are peer reviewed by the community, and this is unpaid work. The board work is unpaid, so it's a question of resources, some of it, but also it's a community. So you get certified, you can become a member of the Assembly of Reviewers, and we do need more reviewers, and then we need the community more. So there are many things we could and should do. Core Trust Seal is a general certification, so it's not discipline specific. And what I hear from this discussion also is that there's a need to discuss these practices within communities, the best practices, and that is not something that Core Trust Seal really is looking at. The Core Trust Seal is more looking for evidence that the applicant is responding to the needs of the designated community. So there's room for improvement. That's just a point I wanted to make. But maybe Olivier has more. He's the chair.
Yeah, maybe I can add. Sorry, Françoise and Maggie, if you had your hand raised before me. But yeah, I just want to add, like Mary said, this is a community, well, a domain agnostic certification. So it's valid for any research community. The main advantage of that is that it can be included in national plans for open science, like it has been in France, for example. Core Trust Seal is quoted in the French National Plan for Open Science, and that's the reason why we've got a national initiative to support certification, right? As Marie said, maybe the requirements could be improved, but again, that's a community effort, and every 3 years we review those requirements and adjust them when it's relevant. And that's, again, a community effort, because we involve the whole community in that revision of the requirements. Right. I'm not gonna talk about specific application like Marie said, but we do have a secretariat, and if there are some problems, you can contact us. Again, the board and the reviewers are all work on an in-kind basis. So so you need to bear with us if it's not quick enough, or you would like it to be faster. That's it.
Thank you. Francois, the last comment.
Yes, I would like to say again why we have this activity in France. It's because Core Trust Seal certification has been in the National Plan for Open Science from the very first version, and it has been citing Core Trust Seal in the last version. And the point is to bring people towards certification, but the core aspect is to help people to improve their practices. So in that case, the criteria we have found for our workshops and discussions during the workshops, that it helps people to understand what they are doing and to think about how they manage data. And it's the first aim of the group I put a link to in the chat, to help people to think about how they work. And I think for that, the Core Trust Seal, and why they are here also. Core Trust Seal is a criteria are very good for that. And this is also why we spend efforts to help people to understand the criteria and to understand what they can do and for themselves using the criteria. And then if they wish, they go to certification and to apply. But the first aim is to improve the general practices of the community with respect to the way they manage repositories.
Thank you. And just to say, if you do have further thoughts on this, there is the notes document that's open right now to put those in, and also the spreadsheet as well for some more concise factual information.
Sorry, I have a comment to Carol. It's not true that you have to have CTS to be on the national roadmap. CTS is cited in the National Strategy for Open Science, which is completely different. So well, what you have written is not true. Sorry for
in the general sense that it needs to be at the national level, Francois. I mean, that's what you're saying. It has to be, if it's named as a national policy activity in some way, then you're more likely to get national resources. And if you get national resources, then it becomes viable at the national level. That's what I'm hearing from you.
I am not speaking about the resources for the repositories.
No, resources, I mean people. By resources, I don't mean database, I mean help.
Okay, well, let's leave that for the moment and move on, because we've got a couple of other conversations to get through. Sorry, just one question there in the chat for the Core Trust Seal, people to respond to. So there's a question from Nick. What's the subscription rate these days? So if anyone knows, can you put that into the chat? Otherwise, can we go back to the slides, please, Sarah? And yeah, move on to recommendation 3. There we go. Yes, thank you. So we have 2 conversation starters for this, and they're going to follow each other. So this is recommendation 3. Due to their evident advantages, support networks for repositories at all levels, thematic, national, international, should be established. So our first conversation starter, this is Kathleen Shearer. It's going to talk about the international community and European repository strategies. So Kathleen.
Thank you, Lawrence, and hi everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I also don't have any slides, but I'm only going to talk for 5 minutes.
Mhm.
So, and I'm going to echo a lot of the things that were already mentioned earlier, because I think they're very important in terms of moving forward. My organization CORE is the Confederation of Open Access Repositories, and we are an international association trying to strengthen the global repository network writ large, shall we say. And of course, these repositories, there are thousands of repositories now, around 6,000 to 7,000. We're not exactly sure how many. And they are fundamental for moving forward with widespread open science policies that are being adopted around the world. And, I think it's important to recognize that repositories really support a variety of needs, a variety of different requirements. And so it's important to have this sort of very distributed network of repositories as well around the world. But the reality on the ground in terms of good practices with repositories is really variable. Of course, in developing countries, practices are, shall we say, less robust than repositories in the global north, but we see a lot of variability even in the most well-developed countries in the world. And I think our aim at CORE is really to try to strengthen those repositories so that they can be trusted and trustworthy and an integral part of the research infrastructure moving forward. So moving over to Europe, it was about 2 years ago, CORE launched a strategic initiative to strengthen repositories. And part of that initiative is to work with regional and national partners locally to address the specific challenges that we see in different regions. So we launched a project with OpenAIRE, Liber, and Spark Europe about 1.5 years ago, a strategy to try to strengthen the European repository network. And the repositories that we represent really are very diverse. So we're not just talking about data repositories, we're talking about articles and theses, software, all types of open access repositories in the ecosystem. So part of this work was actually the first thing we did in terms of this strategy was to do a survey of European repositories. What was the current challenges there? How should we move forward with this strategy? And we found 3 main challenges. One, for repositories in general, one is like trying to maintain the software platforms that they're managing. The second was applying consistent and comprehensive good practices in terms of metadata, preservation, and usage statistics. And the third was really this issue around visibility in the scholarly ecosystem. In a way, repositories have been a bit of like second-class citizens in the scholarly ecosystem. Everybody has been focusing for many years on publications and journals and how we create a sustainable environment for those particular infrastructures. But to me, repositories are even more important because they are going to be collecting a variety of things, including the underlying research data from research. We also found in the survey that very few of the repositories in Europe are able to comply with certification frameworks. So the bar is just simply too high. And that's just a fundamental reality that I think we need to grapple with. We cannot set these frameworks at such a high level that only 1% of the repositories in the ecosystem can comply with them. Then we won't have enough repositories to be able to support open science. So we need a balance there. And I thought, Carol, your comments were really interesting about creating like priorities and domain level expectations rather than a generic framework that all repositories have to adhere to. So I guess for us, we identified based on this survey 3 areas that we would like to work on in the coming couple of years. One is really highlighting the value proposition and advocating for the critical role of repositories in Europe. And these are all sort of chicken and the egg things. They are all quite related to each other. The next is propagating good practices for repositories across the continent. And the third is this issue of really trying to strengthen and help to create these national coordinated networks that we think will really be, shall we say, a mechanism to support community of practice and identification of good practices in various countries, sort of like what's happening in France. So I guess my key takeaways for this particular conversation is I think what we need to do is develop models that allow repositories to incrementally adopt good practices rather than create a very high bar. And then with those variety of good practices, like what are our priorities? What should repositories work on first? You know, this is really important because if there's all these requirements, most repositories are incredibly understaffed compared to what those requirements are asking for. Where should repositories focus and how should they prioritize their investment in good practices? And I think that's often where like the domain can come in or the national level, requirements can come in. I totally agree about the community of practice and how we can strengthen community of practices. And I think my experience is that communities of practice work best at the national level because this is where colleagues feel most comfortable to interact with each other. As soon as you go beyond, maybe it could work in Europe, I think, but if you go beyond an individual country, then it's harder and harder for people to have those informal relationships with each other that really build a community of practice. And then I guess my final takeaway would be this advocacy work that needs to be done. We need to raise the visibility of the importance of repository, especially at the national level, and have governments recognize that this is an important part of research infrastructure and they need to invest in it. Because, again, like I think a big issue that most repositories are grappling with is being understaffed and trying to struggle with a variety of requirements that is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to adhere to. So I think I'll leave it there, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Yeah, we'll come to that in a moment. So I'll just hand now to Mari, who's also going to add to this conversation. So all yours.
Okay, thank Lawrence. So if you're looking at the slides, you can see one slide about the Fidelis, but I can also talk without it. I'm here to tell you about this new project that has already been mentioned. It will start in January 25 and last for 3 years. As mentioned, it's called Fidelis, and it aims to build a European network of trustworthy digital repositories. I'd also like to apologize from the project principal investigator Damien Le Carpentier because he couldn't be here today, so I'm substituting for him. I'm leading work packages in this project. So in this project, we have 24 partners that represent the various domains, the various repository types, and many European countries. Altogether, I think we have about 200 repositories within these project partners or connected to these project partners. The coordinator is CSC, the IT Center for Science. I think the something that has become evident in the discussions today is the community of practice. And I think this project will provide answers to that, and not only in the way of that we will build and establish this operational network of TDRs, but we will also provide guidance and support. We will strive for more interoperability and try to foster a supportive open science environment. We will start with something that is really basic. So we need to understand what we mean by TDR. I think there's also, Paolo already mentioned that the common agreements on what is important, and that's so true. So we want to know, and we know that this is not straightforward, but without a common consensus on what constitutes a TDR, we really can't assess if a particular repository can be recommended as trustworthy. And we know that the repository landscape is complex, and there are a lot of attributes that the repositories have. There's a lot of discussions to be had. However, we also think that if we don't do this in a correct way and in this community consensus way, there's a risk that we will witness a proliferation of criteria in the coming years without necessarily any transparency. I think transparency is one of the key issues here. So I would say it's my view that if you preserve digital objects for the long term, core trust seal is really the core. I mean, it's really generic, it's the core. If you don't have the mission for the long-term preservation, then core trust seal is not the correct certification, but then what else is there? So I think there's a gap in the market. So in the project, we expect to harmonize and inform and validate the existing criteria. We don't want to replace existing criteria or create new criteria in this project. And the other thing is that we want to support and guide repositories in achieving a trustworthy status. We also want the repositories to be able to continuously improve, especially in the context of EOSC, because that is the framework where we are working within this project. So there will be, for example, guidance for repositories and guidance for continuous improvement, best practices, and also cascading grants that will be made available for repositories to implement different solutions. And then the project will also support and provide training for the recipients of these grants, but also more generally. So this is a big project, and we do hope that we will have this network of trustworthy digital repositories that will also provide a common voice of repositories to the EOSC ecosystem. And we don't expect all the repositories that join this network to be certified to start with. So we want to be very inclusive. We want to network both the project and the network. We want them to be very inclusive. So we are really looking forward to working with as many repositories as possible, as many communities as possible. And then we are looking forward to all the discussions. And I think today has already provided a lot of good thoughts and food for thought thinking. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Thank you, Kathleen, as well. So again, any immediate thoughts, Paolo?
Yeah, I have a simple question. Kathleen is actually has been the director of CORE, right? So CORE is a known global network of repositories and libraries, and they are already putting together continents, and not just in Europe, in trying to align on several aspects of repositories, from the internal architecture to common services, infrastructure, vocabularies. So there's a lot of work there and a lot of contacts. And I was wondering, what is the overlap between Fidelis or Fidelis and this network. So if they are already trying to cooperate, or if they're trying to do the same exercise through different, let's say, tools and networks. So if there's, so what is the potential collaboration if it's already ongoing? Because I see otherwise a lot of, you know, redundancy going on, and it would be a shame.
Thanks, Paula. I don't know if Marie or I should answer that, but we haven't had any discussions yet about potential collaboration, but certainly CORE would be open for that. One of the things that it's very important to keep in mind is that you know, the global north tends to be farther ahead in terms of these types of imposing these types of requirements, but it can have a negative impact on other countries that aren't ready to adopt them, because what happens is they become a sort of internal way of assessing the value of a repository writ large. And so I think CORE tries to intervene in a way where we say we will, you know, if Fidelis comes out with some, you know, a potential list of criteria, we will definitely vet that with our international community because I mean, it often doesn't work in less resourced environments. And again, like for us, what we aim to do is take this incremental approach where we're trying to build good practices in repositories rather than creating an assessment framework that most repositories fail. So, I mean, I think it depends on whether Fidelis is interested in, you know, that perspective being brought to the table.
Well, yes, Fidelis will start in January, so that's an obvious reason why there's been no collaboration so far. But we will have an outreach activity, and during the proposal writing phase, we did talk about the international collaboration possibilities. So even though we will be building a European network, this is an EOSC funded project. We do understand that this is global. So yes, we will be in contact, I'm sure.
Okay, just looking through the chat, there's a comment here from Maggie about the new RDA group, repo2pub. And there's a link in there for those who are interested in following that up. I didn't see sort of any other direct questions in the chat at the moment, but it's interesting that, yeah, Fidelis is sort of addressing this idea of a network or a community directly. So it's obviously responding to an evident need there, which we've seen come up again and again so far today. And also, yes, the question again, Kathleen was talking about CORE, about the effort involved in Core Trust Seal is something of a barrier to a lot of repositories in terms of the requirements that it places to meet, and also the resources need to address that. So, sorry, Carol, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, it's just something that you just said about the communities aspect, that I'm having this lively discussion with Francois, which I think we have a heated agreement actually, which is that we operate, because we have to scale across biosciences, we operate a community of communities because we have multiple tiers, which I think is what Kathleen is mentioning about, you know, not setting the bar too high. So we have we check against the national resources that come from our national nodes. We have communities. We have about 40 different communities, plants versus animal husbandry and so on. And each of those have their favorite repositories that they also throw into the mix. Then we have sort of the ones that the entire network says are the most important ones. Without this resource, we won't be able to operate the ecosystem, and that varies because it's not to do with how many people use it, it's how important it is to the ecosystem. Because you can have a resource that doesn't have many, has middling quality, let's say, when Kathleen's kind of listed tiers of quality, but it's used by everybody. So really, it absolutely needs to be aided to become better, not penalized. And others have excellent quality, but nobody uses them because the data is just now, this isn't how we do it anymore. That isn't the technology that we use. We have to basically sunset it, despite the fact it's really good and it has really good preservations, but nobody uses that anymore. So it's a kind of, you have to be smart about it. So we use all sorts of tiers. It's a complicated network, but that means it scales because we're using everybody in the network. And also everybody feels as if they have some ownership of the decisions are. So I think there's something here about the communities, the mixture of communities. There's also something here about the different degrees of the trustworthiness, as it were, or the quality. There's something here to do with being smart about how it fits into the ecosystem of the resources that you're dealing with. So I just wanted to point that out. That's what's all in our chat.
Thank you. Francois.
Yes, I would not say we are fighting, we are just discussing and to try to understand what is going on. And my point in the discussion is that it requires lots of thoughts and resources to establish a community framework which is disciplinary. And Elixir is a strong thing, a strong network with very dedicated people and resources, at least some resources, and I think it helps a lot. And they had a real willingness to do that, and it's very good because it's disciplinary-oriented criteria on quality and so on. So I have absolutely no objection to that. My only point is that not all the disciplinary fields are organized in a way in which they can afford to do this kind of exercise. So I think this is why I am an astronomer and we are a strong community and we hold together and so on. We do that too. But the choice was to go to a generic framework, also to have an external look to what we do using the core trust seal criteria. And I am a member of the core trust seal community. I cannot hide that. And it's exactly what Carol was saying. I belong to the community. I try to help to have things done as well as possible. And so the community feeling can be at different levels. And then we can all work to build on it and to improve things, I would say. So there is no objection to have things which work well, which are oriented on the specific needs of a community, but one cannot, so either not being able to set a specific framework for a community or prefer to go to the generic level to be included in a wider context than what we do not do well, I would say.
Okay, Marie.
Totally agree with Francois there. And I just from Fidelis' viewpoint, so we will address this variety of both requirements and the landscape by providing an overall matrix of characteristics, functions, activities that are exhibited across a broad range of repositories. So we hope that this will become a reference model for alignment and cooperation across the repositories in the network, but also within EOSC and maybe even more widely. another thing is that I think when it comes, for example, the quota seal, but also to other certifications and even, you know, some fair assessments, even though I think that you shouldn't just stare at a fair score, but to understand the wider context. But I think we should devise ways to how repositories can expose the attributes for more automatic assessments. So repository registries is one way to do this, and but I think there's a lot of work to be done.
Kathleen.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just wanted to follow on from what Carol was saying, because I really think we need to think about this in a very flexible way. There are different needs. Different communities have different needs, and the requirements may differ in different domains. And so, I mean, I think it's excellent to have good practice, identified criteria around good practice, but imposing that as something, a pass or fail, is really a very, very bad idea, because what we really need is these repositories to improve, you know, incrementally, which is the only way it's going to happen, their practices globally. And I just wanted to give you an example of how these kind of things can be misused, because and I will use the United States as an example. They created desired characteristics for data repositories in the United States when they adopted their open science policies, the OSTP memo. These desired characteristics became a requirement, and there were about 3 repositories in the United States that were able to adhere to these desired characteristics. And the funders imposed this. Very few repositories could comply with them, and the funders had no way of actually assessing it. So the problem is sometimes these criteria can really be misused, and misused by, in particular, funders or governments who don't really have a good understanding of the ecosystem, but you know, are well-meaning, but again, don't have a good understanding of the ecosystem. So I think, you know, flexibility is really important, and the way we present these various frameworks and criteria should be presented in a way that we're trying to move repositories towards good practices, rather than, you know, imposing, you know, kind of an exam or a test or a pass-fail on them.
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things in the chat that you may have missed in the discussion that's going on there. So there was the RDA Trust Working Group survey about the trust principles, Lisa there, and there's a link if you want to scroll back for that. And also from Alison, again, encouraging everyone to join the community-based catalogue of requirements for trustworthy technical repository service providers working group, the RDA there. So yeah, if you interested in those, go back and have a look through the chat. Yeah, I mean, unless anyone else has any quick points to make. Oh yes, okay, Francois.
Just something I wrote in the chat also, the fact that we have chosen to go to Core Trust Seal for certification because we had reasons to do that. So I think that it's a possibility which is good for some people, and it's good it's here, and it's good that it builds a community of people interested in this kind of process, of going through this kind of process. So I agree that there should be steps toward it, possibly, but I also think that some people agree with the way it is done, and you cannot forget that. I mean, we are here after all, also.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm not touching upon what François said, but I see that we have a good production of different working groups where similar concepts are being discussed. And I'm referring here again to the problem of resources and to the problem of time and effort. So what I would like to do is a sort of pray to Fidelis and to CORE and to these RDA groups to find ways somehow to converse, to avoid the problem of sitting at multiple tables for people interested to repeat the same things or write documents that are somehow the same. Or so let's try, because we are all a community after all. Some of us are funded good, and we could exploit that. And I see that Fidelis has the opportunity to do that with Cascade funds and so on. But we should find ways somehow to converge and not to duplicate our efforts, right? So it's very important that we find common tables, but not multiple ones. You know, the same thing happened too many times in Europe. I'm sitting on 2, 3, 4, 5 different tables discussing the same things, hoping they will converge at some point, and it's a huge waste of time. So it would be great, since we are all here now, to make sure that it will be one of our objectives, good proposition for 2025, let's say.
Okay, that's a nice note to finish on. Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit to the discussion on communities. Just the point that a community of practice is a very specific type of community, organized very much around cooperation and support, mutual support and cooperation on working towards an identified common goal. So there's different types of communities within there. Communities of practice may not be always the most appropriate one, and they may not work too well at scale as well, and across distance maybe. So yeah, there's different types of communities. Communities are different to networks as well. So, you know, may have a network that connects people, but they're not actually creating a space to support working together. That as well. And networks have a place, of course, I'm not saying they don't, but yeah, just thinking a bit about what it is you want to achieve in terms of cooperation. Is a community an appropriate way to do that? Then come in the questions about, you know, size, and of course, the larger the group, the more somebody needs to be organizing it, in terms of, you know, agenda settings, and targets and the administrative types of things as well. So yeah, lots of things to put into there. So we are moving to past and the end. So I just wanted to pull out some key points that I picked out from the conversations today. Just three. So importance of standardization in terms of terminology, keeping consistent terms internally and externally is come across as important. Community cooperation has obviously been a big one in this discussion here. You know, a desire to get support from the community and to give support to community has come across as very strong. You know, we all want to have the best repositories possible, and we do not always start with from the same point in terms of resources and time. And yeah, the final point that came across to me as well is the bar, if you like, the standard core trust deal as a standard to reach. It may not be achievable for everyone, and it may not be appropriate for everyone as well. So again, thinking about, you know, what is sort of appropriate and achievable in there, and recognizing that that has its place as well in the community, ways around there. So those are three of the things I pulled out of there. Just a final reminder that there is the document that's open. You know, make sure that you get your points of view, your comments into that document, especially if you didn't get the chance to speak here, or you want to reflect on something, or you put something in there, in something was put in the notes, and you want to make sure it was reflected accurately. So I do urge you to do that. And yeah, if we could go back to the slides. There is a final slide to show you. So this is the final open call for financial support. So the final call for open financial support is now open, launched on Monday, I think, and this is to help people on their FAIR journeys move towards managing data type schemes, vocabularies, policy work, testing the trustworthy and fair enabling repositories prototype, and also looking at implementation of shared API for semantic catalogs as well. So there's the link there in the slides. Slides should be available to you all as well, and the notes as well. And on that point, I would like to thank all of you for a very rigorous and vigorous, I should say, discussion today. That was very interesting listening, and I'd particularly like to thank those of you that provided conversation starters there as well. So thanks very much, everyone. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.